Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It's Tuesday, December 2nd around here, and we got some games to pick. We got to pick all of the conference championships that are going on this weekend, all over the FBS. We will go to, obviously, the power conferences first. We'll work through the ACC, the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10, number 1 against number 2 up there in Indianapolis, and then we'll move on. We'll get to the group of 5 teams before I just have some things I want to talk about before we get to the playoff rankings tonight, and they'll be applicable tomorrow, so if you're watching this a little bit late, no worries about that. Just a couple of things I want to talk about, a couple of teams I want to talk about that G5 spot, whether or not it should be there, all of that different type of stuff before we get into probably the most consequential rankings of the entire year. Obviously, the final ones are going to be massive, but these are huge in terms of figuring out just what they're thinking going into this one. But we got to start with what's happening in between the white lines. So much talk outside the white lines over the last couple of weeks. It's time to talk about the big ones and conference championships coming up this weekend. We got to talk about the power conferences first, and I feel like we should start with the weirdest one of the bunch. Duke plays Virginia in Charlotte for the ACC title. That is going to be Saturday at 8 p.m. Virginia favored by only 2.5 in this football game, over under at 57.5. Somehow, some way, Duke found their way to Charlotte, and they have a chance of winning the ACC title at 7-5. Absolutely insane. Anyone claiming that Miami should be in this game, even more insane. I'll be totally honest. But at the end of the day, Duke is here, and we'll see what happens. I think it's one of those debates. Will they be in with a win? I've said pretty firmly that I don't think they should. Obviously, if something changes in the group of 5, and we'll talk about those games in a second, if something changes there, then maybe Duke could jump in as that 12 seed. As of right now, if everything goes chalk this weekend, I would lean towards Duke not being in. Even with a win here, maybe if they win by 30 points. I'm totally convinced, but at the end of the day, I'm leaning towards Duke being on the outside looking in regardless of the result in this one. But these two teams really couldn't be any different on the offensive side of the ball. Duke is a very pass-first team. Darian Mensah has been incredible for them in his 1 year, and they paid a pretty penny to get him, so he's really lived up to the billing in a lot of ways. They haven't been able to run the ball. And the issue with that is when you can't run the ball, you usually don't have the openings that you usually have on the back end that Darian Mensah has taken full advantage of. In the games that Darian Mensah has really passed the ball all around the yard, Nate Shepherd's had a great day. And that's why I think he might be the single most important player for Duke in this football game. He's got to find openings. It's a top 25 rush defense on the other side for Virginia. It's not going to be easy to, but unless you want to force Darian Mensah to go for 350 for you to stay in this football game, you got to get a little bit from Nate Shepherd. He has progressed incredibly throughout the years. A very, very talented kid, but he's got to find a couple of openings in this football game. Duke, number 12 in the country in pass offense, 95th in rush offense. Virginia, 34th in the country in pass offense, 53rd in rush offense. So a little bit more even-keeled if you're Virginia with a little downtick in the rush game. That being said, they're incredibly, incredibly talented at the running back position. Jamari Taylor can carry them to a win. Point blank period. Duke gives up about 140 on the ground per game. There's an opening there. If Jamari Taylor can be a difference maker in this one, Chandler Morris can have all the openings in the world, and Trell Harris can make big-time catches, and this game will kind of be a rout pretty quickly. If they can't, and this thing goes fully in Chandler Morris's hands, then you might have a little bit of an issue. It's a very good pass defense. On the other side, a very opportunistic one. You could very well force a couple of mistakes, and then this game gets sketchy in a hurry where you don't want to put the ball in Darian Mensah's hands. I don't want to put an exact number on it, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure that guy is on the sidelines as much as possible. When he gets into a rhythm passing, very few defenses, especially in the ACC, are going to be able to slow that kid down. So that's something to keep in mind here. If Duke is able to pass the ball early, it might be hard to slow that kid down at the end of the day for Virginia, but really like this matchup. I really do. I think there's a lot of people kind of poo-pooing this matchup. It's a ridiculous conference. I'm not saying the ACC has been incredible this year. It's been very weird. It's been a little bit down. The quality of team overall is not where it used to be. I don't think there's an argument for that. This Virginia team's been pretty darn special. It's been really, really fun to watch what they've been able to do. Tony Elliott putting together a great team. Chandler Morris taking that next step in his progression. And then you got a Duke team that's just the ultimate agent of chaos in a time in college football where it's got to be welcome, right? We got to be a little bit weird. We got to be a little bit different around this time. But the only advantage that I see from a positional perspective, at least, is at the quarterback. I do believe Duke has the better quarterback in this game. I don't think he's going to get the help around him that is necessary. I think Virginia does a much better job of balancing out this offense, giving Chandler Morris easy answers, and I think Virginia is going to be able to win this football game. I'll say Virginia gets the win here 31-24. They handle business. I think Duke is going to be able to push them in this game. I think Darian Mensah makes enough plays to keep this one interesting. But at the end of the day, I'm going to pick Virginia. They've been consistent as can be all season. If Duke wins, we'll talk about what that could possibly mean. I tend to believe it will mean 2 group of 5 teams in that playoff, and that might make some people mad. But again, something we'll talk about later in the show. Moving forward to the Big 12, that one's at noon on Saturday, going to be a rematch between BYU and number 5 Texas Tech. Texas Tech getting 12.5 points here. That's quite the margin, and I understand it. The first time these two met, Texas Tech rolled BYU 29-7. There was no opening for the BYU run game at all throughout that football game. Texas Tech just kind of went about their business. There wasn't much of a question about which way that game was going from the absolute jump. So Texas Tech being favored by 12.5 isn't all that crazy when you really think about it. This is such a funny game to me because I have the utmost respect for what BYU has been able to do this year. I think they're a remarkable team. I think they've done incredible things this year, and we'll talk about what they mean for the playoff here in a little bit in the show. But at the end of the day, whenever Texas Tech is playing a football game, particularly against other Big 12 teams, that defensive line is just too much. For the vast, vast majority of teams, and BYU has shown that it was a little bit too much for them the first time around. It's both a great thing for Texas Tech and makes breaking down some of their games not super interesting. Because here's the reality. If BYU's offensive line can't win that matchup, the game's over. Texas Tech is going to dominate this game. Bear Bachmeier is going to get hit by David Sanders over and over, or David Bailey, over and over and over again, and you are going to have a really long day. Jacob Rodriguez is going to make plays. Lee Hunter is going to be a beast. Romello Height's going to get in there. There's going to be too many guys to deal with. If the BYU offense can find a way to bypass this defensive line, more power to them. That's not something that they're really capable of doing, or something they haven't done this year. They are capable of doing it, I suppose. I do think Bear Bachmeier has gotten much better as a passer. He has won them games as a passer throughout this season. I just don't think this is the team that you're going to be able to step back and throw balls down the field. You're going to have to kick it out and hope that they don't tackle in the open field. That's really tough against this team. They have dudes all over the field that are incredibly good at helping out in the run game, really good at coming down in the screen game and making plays. It's just a defense that's really hard to game plan against, especially when you don't have that prerequisite talent on the offensive line. That's just the reality. That's why when Texas Tech gets to the playoff, we're going to have a very interesting conversation, and I think Texas Tech should be in regardless of a win or a loss here. Want to make that very clear from the jump. But let's say BYU can play even on the offensive line and defensive line, or even they lose that battle, but it's not quite as aggressive as the one they did before. I think there's 3 things that you have to do to be able to get a win here and to be able to kind of bypass all of the advantage that Texas Tech just objectively does have from a size, talent, and physicality perspective. You need turnovers. I think you have to be at least +2 in the turnover category to be able to win this football game. You have to force a couple of turnovers from Baron Morton, from a couple of these guys. Maybe you get a couple of fumbles. Just muck up the game early on. Be up in that turnover margin early on and hopefully hold on to it the rest of the game. Parker Kingston's got to make a play in the punt return game. Whether that's putting them in plus territory when catching the ball at the 10, you get a 40-yard return to put them at midfield, whether it's getting a punt return going to the house like he did last week, whatever that looks like. Just he needs to be a difference maker when the Texas Tech defense doesn't have a chance to stop him. That's the biggest part of that piece of it. And then 1 or 2 big runs from LJ Martin. You have to be able to get LJ Martin a couple of creases and allow that guy to get going. He doesn't have elite breakaway speed. He's probably not going to break one for 80 yards. But you have to be able to make them respect that run game and then open up a couple of chances for Chase Roberts, for Parker Kingston in the pass game. If you can't do that, if you can't win the turnover battle, if you can't get a couple of big plays in the special teams play, if you can't get LJ Martin just a couple of burst plays to get this offense going, it's going to be a really, really long day. I don't mean to poo-poo this game. I don't mean to downplay it. It's going to be an awesome one. And I have all the respect in the world for Kalani Sitake and BYU. In fact, could be Penn State's head coach. A lot to talk about tomorrow with that. But at the end of the day, this BYU team, I just can't trust that in the last month or so, or over the last 2 months, I suppose, since they last played, I can't trust that offensive line has made up that gap. It was a massive gap last time around. I think Texas Tech still has the pretty comfortable advantage here. I do think BYU plays better football. I think Texas Tech wins this one 28-17. I think BYU finds a way to manufacture offense just enough. I think Bear Bachmeier's played much better football. But at the end of the day, that Texas Tech defense is so far and away the most physically impressive and from a talent perspective, is far and away the best group in the entire conference. I don't see that changing on Saturday. So I'm going to lean towards Texas Tech here. I feel pretty comfortable with that one. That's nothing against BYU. It's just all the respect in the world towards Texas Tech. Number 4, Georgia versus number 10, Alabama. You can run from it, but it's inevitable. These two teams in Atlanta at the end of the year for the SEC championship, it's just what happens. Texas was able to sneak in there with a very favorable schedule a year ago, but at the end of the day, they found their way back to even. It is going to be the Bulldogs against the Crimson Tide. A lot of people hate it. I get I have Uga over my shoulder, so who am I to talk? I love it. I think these two teams facing off in these massive moments over and over and over again is fascinating to watch because you get to see who I consider to be the very best coach in the entire country in Kirby Smart try to overcome that last mountain. Not to say that last mountain. He's got plenty of things that he wants to do going on the rest of his career, but this is a mental hurdle. Can he get over it this time around, hoist another SEC championship for the second year in a row, and be on his way to a CFP as probably the 2 or 3 seed, depending on how that Big Ten championship goes. But at the end of the day, this is such an interesting matchup because about a month ago, about 2 weeks ago, really, I would have said these are two of the best teams in the country. These offenses are going to get after each other. And then they put on the performances they did last week. And really, Bama, it's gone back a little bit further, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But neither of these teams played great offense a week ago. Georgia Tech did a great job of shutting down Georgia. Alabama has been shaky for about a month here. And I think a lot of that, we've talked about it on here, is just you're putting too much on Ty Simpson's shoulders. You have been pretty much all year, and he carried you to a lot of wins throughout that time, including the one, I think, in Athens when he went 8 for 8 on the first 8 third downs. He was absolutely lethal in that football game. He won you that one. I'm not sure he can do that in this football game. Georgia has taken massive steps forward on the defensive side of the ball. I think the run game has much improved. The caveat to that, and the big thing in this game, which sounds crazy to say this is the big thing in this game, is Georgia's center going to play? Drew Bobo has to play in this football game. He is a massively important player to this offense. Outside of Gunnar Stockton, I'd say that's the single most important player, and you can imagine that last name has a lot to do with it. This guy understands this offense better than anyone on that Georgia roster. He calls out protections incredibly well. Great communicator, knows everything that you need to know to compete against all of the teams in the country and execute that offense at a very, very high level. Not to mention you got Tim Keenan on the other side of the football. You need that guy out there. Even if he's out there, I don't know how close to 100% he is. He had the laceration on his hand, and then he had something else come up against Georgia Tech. We'll see what that looks like. We'll see if he even goes. I'd probably bet on him not going, if I'm being totally honest, but that is a huge loss for this football team. They got to find run lanes on the outside because you try to run into Tim Keenan the entire afternoon, it's going to be really, really tough to do. In fact, if you don't watch college football too much, or you're just getting into it, just watch 96 on Alabama the entire afternoon. It's a special thing to watch. There is nothing like what this kid can do in the run game, and it's not all that interesting. It's not all that sexy. It's really good football. There's no doubt about that. For the Bama offense, I've said it before, I'll say it again, it can't all be tie. And they did a relatively good job of this against Auburn early in that game, got Jamarian Miller going, got these guys got the run game going enough. What we talked about with Texas in that going up into that A&M game, you don't have to be special. You don't have to do incredible things. You don't have to go for 175 yards and 3 scores on the ground. You got to give this guy enough. You got to give him enough time. You have to push enough linebackers back into coverage or bring guys up into the box so we can throw behind him. You have to be able to at least take a little bit off his shoulders. The other part of it, their wide receiver is going to have to win one-on-ones on the outside. Georgia obviously mixes and matches what their coverage is going to be depending on the outcome, but they love putting Ellis Robinson out there. He's a very talented one-on-one corner. He's going to get Jeremy Bernard a lot. He's going to get Isaiah Horton. He might get Ryan Williams just a little bit. Been kind of quiet in that Alabama offense lately, and I don't see that changing really throughout this season. That being said, whenever that guy gets the ball in his hands, he is a danger to make a big-time play. There's no doubt about that. So it is going to be a really fun battle. I think both these teams have changed a ton since the last time they've played. I think Georgia's made more progress since the last time they played. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think Alabama's made great progress on the defensive side of the ball, on the offensive side of the ball, especially in the run game. I think they've done really well. Is there a mental hurdle here? There's no doubt about it. Absolutely. Kirby Smart has something going on with the Alabama Crimson Tide. It might be because I'm feeling myself just a little bit by picking Ohio State over Michigan. Not to say that was an incredible pick or anything, but just to say that was a little bit of a mental hurdle breaker as well for Ryan Day. I think Kirby Smart, the third time around against Kalen DeBoer, does what he did to Buster Faulkner the third time around. I think he's going to have his defense ready. I think Gunnar Stockton is going to be ready to make plays. I think Georgia's offense just has more options in the way that they can attack you. And I think they're going to win this football game. I think Georgia wins 27-23. I think they get Alabama on a rematch, actually 1-0 in rematches against Alabama in a specific season. But at the end of the day, I believe they're going to win this football game. I think this team has come a really long way, especially on the defensive side of the football. I think Ty Simpson's going to have a lot more questions to answer, and I don't think the guys around him are going to be able to help him enough for it to make a difference. I think Georgia wins 27-23 and wins their second straight SEC title. Number 1, Ohio State against number 2, Indiana, over there in Indianapolis. It's going to be awesome. This is the one. This is the one that we've been waiting on for quite some time. Now, Indiana came into the season, I think people were skeptical is probably the best word of it. I don't think they were necessarily fully doubting. Now, I had my fair share of questions coming into this year, but for the vast majority of this football season, this has been the one. We've all looked forward and said, it's going to be Indiana, Ohio State. It's going to be 2 undefeated teams at the end of this thing. It's going to be Fernando Mendoza and Julian Sayin walking in, probably competing for the Heisman Trophy. Now, we'll talk about that later on. I think Diego Pavia might have that thing locked up. Again, we'll talk about it later on. But at the end of the day, this one's going to be special. There's no two ways about that. And the funny thing about it is, Ohio State ran away with that Michigan game. They handled them. They played their football. They look incredibly, incredibly impressive and have every single week of the entire season. Indiana did see the blueprint early on in that game against Michigan. Early on in that game, they found a way to run the ball, did Michigan. They found a way to make one mistake from Julian Sayin. The only problem was they got 3 points, and they didn't get 7. If Indiana can get 7, if they can mirror the results that Michigan was able to do early on in that game, they could be up 14-0 before Ohio State knows it. Now, I don't know if it'll go that smoothly. I don't know if Julian Sayin will give the ball to them the way he did against Michigan. I'm just saying there is a world there where you can jump on this team and it not be a one-possession game after it. It be a 2-possession game, and then Ohio State's really playing from behind and really starting to push and maybe really in a corner where last week they were pushed into a corner a little bit but had plenty of escape hatches and took one of them. But at the end of the day, there is a world here where Indiana can jump all over them, and maybe Ohio State is pushed more into a corner than they have been all year, and then we see what happens. The only way that's going to happen, and the only way they're able to even hold on to a possible 14-point lead in this hypothetical that I'm talking about, you got to get after Julian Sayin. If you do not touch Julian Sayin in this football game, he will kill you. Point blank period. That kid is too accurate. He's too talented. He's too smart to not kill you. Michigan got there 0 times. They had 0 pressures the entire football game. We saw what happened. In time, that kid tore them to pieces. He's going to do the same to you. I think you're more equipped to get after the quarterback. I think you can do more with Aiden Fisher and some of those linebackers. I think you can bring D'Angelo Pons or Amari Farrell off the outside. I think you have really talented guys like Michael Kamara on the front that can make some big-time plays. If you don't get after him, if you don't force the ball out of his hands quickly, if you allow these explosive plays, the explosive posts and deep overs and things to develop long-term, you're in trouble. They're going to hit big-time plays, and you're probably not scoring more than maybe 21 on this defense. You have to find a way to get after Julian Sayin, at least force the ball out of his hands quickly. He can be accurate as long as it's 10 yards and in, and you are tackling the second that you touch someone, he's on the ground, and you can make sure that you are keeping them in front of the chains and forcing 14-play drives, not 7 or 5-play drives. It's a tough thing to do. It's a remarkably tough thing to do, especially with how good that Ohio State offensive line is. You got to find a way to do it if you want to win this football game. Also, you got to stop Bo Jackson. Just to add a little bit more fun to your plate, Bo Jackson's now a freak. He's played incredible football last week against Michigan. He was remarkable, and if he finds a way to get going early in this football game, you're not going to have a chance to get after Julian Sayin, and we know how that goes. You are not going to have a chance to win this football game. So you got to find a way to slow down the run. You got to find a way to get after Julian Sayin and force the ball out quickly, and you have to tackle really well. Point blank period. If you are going to stop this Ohio State offense, those are the things you plainly have to do, and that doesn't even get to the defense. That is the very best unit in the entire country and has been the entirety of the year. I don't know, man. Indiana needs to find a way to put on a show on the outside in this football game. Elijah Surratt needs to win one-on-one battles routinely. Omar Cooper needs to win one-on-one battles routinely. They need to find a way to get these running backs out on the edge in. They got to make some of the best tacklers in the country miss. It's really hard to do. That's why none of the teams that Ohio State has played thus far have been within 3 scores other than the team they played in the first week of the season. It's tough. It's really, really tough to beat this football team. I think Indiana's a great team, and I think they have the ability to win the national title if things fall into place for them. But at the end of the day, I'm not betting against Ohio State. I'm not picking against this team right now. I'll pick them 27-17. I think Indiana might score a late touchdown, might make this look a little bit nicer than it is. I just think it's going to be really hard for that offense to get moving against this defense. I think the run game will not be what it has been for the majority of the year for Indiana. I think the offensive line is good. I think that Ohio State defensive line is terrifying. So I'm going to lean towards Ohio State here. I'd love to see Indiana pull this thing off and totally flip this thing on its head, make people think that Indiana's the new favorite and Ohio State is old news. It'd be incredible to watch. And I would be lying if I said I wasn't kind of rooting for that. But at the end of the day, if I'm picking one of these teams, I'm picking the Buckeyes. Ohio State's been incredible this year. I think they finish the start the postseason with a Big Ten championship, and then move on to the ultimate goal of a national title in the playoff, very likely, as the number 1 seed overall. But incredible Power 4 games that we're going to get this upcoming weekend. People will tell you that these games don't matter. And yes, a couple of these teams that are going to be in it, they're going to be in it regardless. And we'll talk about some of that later on in the show. Ohio State, Indiana, you're both in the playoff. There's no doubt about that. Indiana badly wants a Big Ten title. Ohio State badly wants to get back on top of this conference and prove that they are the class of this conference after Michigan and then Oregon, a new team, came in and beat them in the regular season and then took a trophy that they felt was theirs. These teams want it. I understand the playoff doesn't really change one way or the other. These teams badly want these games, and I think we should hype them up like we should in their conference championships. Let's give them a little bit of love. But at the end of the day, they're going to be incredible matchups. Cannot wait to get into those. But we got to talk about the group of 5. We got to give the group of 5 some love before we get finish off with our predictions this weekend or this week. We'll get into the group of 5 championship predictions right after this. So stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just picked all of the Power 4 championships. I am going to pick Virginia over there in the ACC and avoid some of the chaos scenarios that possibly could have happened. I think Texas Tech finishes off their job in the Big 12. I think Georgia wins the SEC over Alabama, gets over a little bit of a mental hurdle there, and I think Ohio State wins the Big 10. Not betting against that team right now, that's for sure. But let's go ahead and get into the Group of 5. The Group of 5's got to get some love as we get into this weekend, and frankly, I'll get into the FCS a little bit later on because we got some playoffs rolling up here pretty quickly, and North Dakota State might run away with it, but at the end of the day, we'll talk about that here pretty soon, probably next week. We'll get into that a little bit more aggressively, maybe tomorrow, depending on the timing that we have. But let's go ahead and jump into this, and let's start over there in Conference USA. Kennesaw State at Jacksonville State. Really, really fun game, and really huge shout out to Jerry Mack. He's done an incredible job in his first year over there at Kennesaw State, only about 30 minutes up the road from where I am right now. Amari Odom has been incredible. Gabriel Benyard has been awesome. Special duo between quarterback and wide receiver there. It's a rough pass defense for Jacksonville State, so you might be able to attack them a little bit. Now, they had 3 interceptions on you last time, so you got to be more careful with the football, but there should be openings on the back end for you to exploit if you can take care of the football, if you're Amari Odom in this football game. But Jerry Mack's done an incredible job. I was a little bit critical of letting go of Brian Bohannon as quickly as they did, but at the end of the day, when you bring in a guy that's done this in his very first year, hard to argue with the option. So Jacksonville State comes into this one a 2.5-point favorite. They're going to lean on the run. That's who they are. That's who they've been for as long as I can remember, really, but especially this season. Cam Cook, incredible football player. Came over from TCU this past season. One of the best players in the Group of 5. Went for 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns on the ground this season. Just an incredible player. Kansas State can't defend the run. So this is going to be a very interesting matchup. You should have two offenses that kind of have their way. They get to play their game, and they get to just see who makes more mistakes, really more than anything else. Kind of what happened in the first matchup where you turn over the ball over 3 times as Kennesaw State, and that's kind of the end of the game. So we'll see what happens in this one. It is a styles make fights type of game. Going to be really fun to watch this one unfold. I'm going to lean towards Jacksonville State. I think they have the ability to run the football, which always makes me feel a little bit more confident compared to a pass-first offense that tends to be a little bit more variable. And then the home field advantage, I think, obviously makes a difference in these Group of 5 matchups. I'm going to take Jacksonville State to get a big-time win and lock up that Conference USA title. Troy at JMU. JMU favored by 21.5 in this football game. That's how dominant they have been in that conference this year. 47.5 is the over-under. This one's Friday at 7 p.m. Going to be a really fun one. I'll be very clear about this football game. This is about JMU winning, of course. They have to win this football game to have a shot. You also got to get some style points. I do think there's a world where Duke wins the ACC championship, and it comes down to how badly did JMU beat Troy yesterday. It's dumb. I really think that's a reality. Now, Troy is a tough team. It's not to say that they're an absolute pushover. They've done some really nice things throughout the season. Pushed Clemson early on in the year. That's when people kind of realized that Clemson might have been a little bit more of a paper tiger than we thought, but at the end of the day, it is a very tough team, and it's going to be a really interesting one. These teams haven't played all year. Goose Crowder coming in for Troy about halfway through the year at quarterback has made a big difference for that offense. They've done some really nice things. The JMU defense has been maybe the very best in the Group of 5 when you really break it down. Top 25, and I believe both run and pass. Can Troy find some offense in this football game is going to be a big-time question. I could try to get weird here. I could try to say Troy's going to find a way to win this football game or keep it close. JMU's going to win. And if JMU doesn't win, they got a big problem on their hands in a lot of different ways. But at the end of the day, I think JMU's going to win this football game. I think they roll in this football game. And then we'll just see. We'll see what happens in the ACC championship, and we'll see if JMU gets the nod over someone else. And what happens with Bob Chesney? Is he coaching in the CFP, or is he on a jet over to LA to start recruiting for UCLA? North Texas at number 24, Tulane. North Texas favored by 2.5 in this football game. Over under at 66.5. Friday, 8 p.m. This is awesome. This is the best group of 5 matchup of the weekend. As you can imagine, in Yulman Stadium, the American has been incredible, really, this entire year. Navy's a great team. Memphis put together a great year in. That's why you see a lot of these coaches getting hired. USF, Alex Golish over there at Auburn now. A lot happening in that conference, including with both of these teams. Eric Morris will take over Oklahoma State right after this season ends for them. Tulane, you're gonna lose. John Sumrall right after this season ends for you, for y'all. It could be on Friday. It could end on Friday, and that could be it for this head coach. They could also win, and I think whichever one of them probably is going to the CFP. Now, there's a debate between North Texas JMU. We'll actually talk about that in the next segment because I think it's really important as we get into the rankings tonight. But at the end of the day, North Texas is going to sling the ball around. The difference between what they were early in the season and what they are now is Caleb Hawkins. Caleb Hawkins has become one of the best young running backs in the entire country, is an absolute freak for that North Texas offense, and I have to imagine there are quite a few people up there in Stillwater hoping that he follows his head coach up there. But on the flip side, Tulane's going to run the football. No doubt about that. They absolutely are going to run the football pretty much start to finish. Jake Retzlaff has been huge in the run game, and they got plenty of other guys to go along with them. But Shaz Preston has come along a really long way at the wide receiver position. Dangerous threat at any moment in the pass game as well. The good news for both these offenses is Tulane, bad pass defense, so Drew Mestemaker should have a very nice day. North Texas, bad rush defense, so they're going to get after each other a little bit. That's why the over-under is set at 66.5. This one's going to be a shootout. I feel very confident when I say that, but at the end of the day, this game is so even to me in so many different ways. I think both these teams have played incredible football. Tulane has some incredible wins throughout the year. North Texas has done some great things, has some minor dips, especially against South Florida, but then picked it right back up and started playing some great football. I'm going to take the team that's juggling less this week, and that's North Texas. North Texas, Eric Morris took the job over there at Oklahoma State and did all of that. He's handled all of that. That is over with. John Sumrall was in Gainesville yesterday. That's not to say John Sumrall did anything wrong. He is doing what every coach has done for ever, really. He's doing the exact thing that he's supposed to be doing. But at the end of the day, that does put you a little bit behind the 8 ball. Both coaches took jobs. Only one took one just a second ago and was at a presser yesterday. I think North Texas wins this football game. I think they get a huge one here, and then we got to figure out what happens in the ACC. Is JMU above them? Do they jump over JMU with this win? It's all on the table. I know for a fact I'd love to see Drew Mestemaker and Caleb Hawkins in the CFP. I think they get a big win over Tulane on the road. I just think there's one too many distractions for this Tulane team right now. UNLV at Boise State, the Mountain West Championship comes down to the two teams you probably picked coming in, UNLV and Boise State, if I had to imagine. Boise State favored by 4 in this game. They dominated this team the last time they played them. Now, they did, when they played them in Boise, they absolutely dominated them and kind of ran them out of the building, really. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch as we head into this one. It's an up and down year for Boise State. Obviously, you start with the loss to South Florida. They've been a little bit iffy, but they got 2 big-time wins late in the season to get into this game. It was kind of a weird situation over there in the Mountain West. Don't know how they went about deciding this one, but 4 teams at the top were totally tied. They came out with UNLV and Boise State. But at the end of the day, UNLV's got to find a way to get some offense in this football game. They got to find a way to get the run game, especially going in this one with Coulandry and Jaden Thomas, really talented guys. The one thing here is Maddox Madsen will be back for this football game. He's been out for about a month for Boise State, and that's part of the reason. It's been a little bit up and down for that football team down the stretch, but they found a way to get him back for this football game. And he killed UNLV the last time around. Went for about 265, 3 touchdowns, did throw a pick, but at the end of the day, he did an incredible job against this football team, and he's probably going to have to in this one as well. UNLV does a solid job against the run throughout this season. The defense overall has some big-time questions, but as they've gotten better throughout the season, I think it's going to be a really fun game. I don't think UNLV is going to be able to go up to Boise and get a win. This is a very tough place to play. I think Maddox Madsen is coming back at the perfect time for this football team, and I think Boise State gets another Mountain West championship under their belt in a rather disappointing year, but they still find a way to get conference supremacy. Miami of Ohio at Western Michigan. Well, at Ford Field in Detroit, but Western Michigan being the home team here. Western Michigan minus 2.5 here, over under at 43.5. This was the only one on Saturday. It's going to be at noon at the same time as the Big 12 championship, but the MAC is a beautiful thing. I think every college football, let's call it sickos, really love the MAC. MACtion is a incredible, incredible thing. It's the reason that we have a stretch just about every year. We're about 50 days. We get football every single day. That's because of MACtion. That's because of teams like Miami of Ohio and Western Michigan. And both these teams are really, really fun. The Red Hawks did make a change at quarterback a couple of weeks ago. Godkowski comes in and done really, really well. They scored 37 and 45 points in their last 2 games. A lot of juice in that offense right now for Miami of Ohio. For Western Michigan, they got some juice as well. They got a really, really comprehensive run game. They got some very, very talented guys in their group like Jaden Buckley that can do some incredible, incredible things on the ground. They lost to Miami of Ohio earlier in the season. I think they come with a little bit of juice in this one. I think Western Michigan gets this one done. I think they run kind of all over Miami of Ohio in some parts of this game, and they find a way to win the MAC for the first time since 2016. Love this team. They've been really, really solid throughout this entire year. They have a really great run game, and I think they find a way to get this one done over there in Ford Field and win the MAC. Incredible group of 5 games that we're going to get this weekend. Obviously, don't quite have the CFP implications that a lot of the other ones do, but pretty special games. There's no doubt about that. And all of these teams badly want to win their conference. Obviously, that JMU result and that North Texas Tulane result going to be massive for the CFP conversations, and we'll talk about that as it kind of unfolds, and we'll see how all of it unfolds and who finds their way into the CFP at the end of the day, which is what we got to talk about. Right after this, we got to jump into just some questions, some thoughts, some overall takes as we head into the penultimate rankings for the CFP. These ones are going to be massive. There's going to be a lot of movement, a lot of teams, where they place. One team in particular down there in Austin is creating a lot of headlines right now. We'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the Group of 5 championship. Some really, really great games. Obviously a lot of attention on James Madison, a lot of attention on North Texas at Tulane. We'll see how those will impact the CFP, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But we got to talk about just leading up to the CFP rankings. It feels like there's a lot of things to figure out, a lot of things to contemplate as we head towards this this penultimate rankings for the CFP, and we got to talk about the teams kind of sitting around the bubble and the teams that will be up for debate as we go through the next 8 days, or really the next 4 days. Now that I think about it, it's going to get very crazy here pretty quickly. But let's start with Notre Dame Miami, because that's the most popular one. I've been relatively clear about this one from at least over the last couple of weeks. I believe Notre Dame to be the better football team right this second. I think Notre Dame has done a ton to kind of prove that they are a much better team than they were when they played Miami. I think Miami has done some of the opposite. Now, Miami has closed the season incredibly well. I think Miami deserves a lot of respect, and I've also said I don't think you can put Notre Dame in and leave Miami out. I just really don't think that can happen unless you want a lot of teams to not play Notre Dame moving forward, or not play these out-of-conference games in general moving forward. That'll be a common theme. We'll talk about that here in a second. But at the end of the day, these two things, I don't think too much will change tonight. I really do think Notre Dame will be above Miami. I don't know if Miami will move all that much. Maybe they'll move just a little bit up. I think it'll come down to the conference title games, and we'll talk about that here in a second. Just how do they view that? How do they view BYU if they lose? How do they view Alabama if they lose? That's a big-time question mark. I think that's what this is going to come down to. If you have to add, if you point a gun to my head and made me pick, or not made me pick, but made me guess what the CFP committee is going to do, I think they're going to put Notre Dame in and leave Miami out. I think at the end of all of this, and we'll talk about this more later, but I really do think that's what's going to happen. I think that'd be a really, really bad decision, but I do think that's what's going to happen, and we're just going to have to live with the consequences of that. But again, we'll see. We'll talk about that here in a second, and we'll see what they do tonight and moving forward. For BYU, this is a tough one. Where they're ranked tonight is massive, because the reality is if you're ranked around 11 or 10 or really anywhere outside of the bracket, you're not getting in with a loss. I can tell you that much. So you got to find a way to be somewhere in that bracket tonight. If you're not, I don't think you're in. I hate to say it. And if you win this weekend, it's all null and void. I think you and Texas Tech are in. Who does that knock out? That's a question that we can answer here in a second. But at the end of the day, this is a huge night for BYU fans. You have to find a way to be in those ranking or be in that bracket tonight. If you're not, you got to pray that they don't love Alabama as much as you would assume they would love Alabama, given the past. But at the end of the day, I don't know what's going to happen with BYU. I believe they're probably maybe the second or probably the first most important team when we talk about the playoff rankings tonight. Where are they? Are they in the field? Because if they aren't, then a loss on Saturday is not going to put them in the field. I can promise you that. Alabama Crimson Tide, another massive question mark. If Alabama wins the SEC, it doesn't matter. We all know that Georgia would be in, Alabama would be in. If they lose, are they in danger of falling out? I don't think they will, and I don't think they should. I'll be plainly clear about this. It's the same take I have about BYU, actually. If they're in the rankings tonight, I think they should stay there. But at the end of the day, did they have a bad loss? Absolutely. But they've done more than enough to prove that they are one of those teams that deserves a shot to compete for a national title. They've played really, really tough games. They lost an Oklahoma game where, yes, they did not play great football. I think Oklahoma's defense has proven more than enough that 21 points against them is pretty darn impressive at the end of the day. That's not trying to totally discount that loss. It's just to say this Alabama team has done plenty, in my mind, to, I don't want to say erase the Florida State loss, but at least it not drag them down far enough to where if they lose an SEC title game on Saturday, that they're out of the CFP. I think they're safe. I think they're okay, but if they leave them out, if they lose that game, barring them getting beat by 30 points, if they leave them out, I'll be incredibly mad. And I think a lot of other people will, and it's not the people you want to be mad if you're the CFP committee. But we'll talk about that if and when it does happen. Vanderbilt, this is a really good team. It's a fantastic football team. They've done incredible things. I think Diego Pavia has a great argument for the Heisman, something that we'll talk about next week, I promise you. But at the end of the day, there's just not enough room. And they really don't have a great argument to find their way into this thing. They've done an incredible job. In a 10-2 SEC team, you wouldn't imagine that they would never be in. But losing to Bama, losing to Texas is a very, very hard path for you to slide up in those rankings. It's just kind of the way it is. Some people are saying it's a logo thing. Some people are saying if it was an Alabama logo or a Texas logo, they'd be in the top 12. I don't buy that. I really don't. Your best win is a Tennessee team that's probably going to be ranked around 23. I just don't buy that. I think it's a good team. I think they've done incredible things this year, and I think they deserve a ton of respect. But you lost to the two teams that they're debating about right around the bubble as well. There's no way you're going to find your way through the wilderness there. It's not to say this team wasn't incredible this year. It's not to say that most years this team wouldn't be in, because they would. It's just one of those years where it's way too crowded and someone was going to be on the outside looking in. I think it's going to be Vanderbilt. Those two losses to Bama and Texas are just way too much to overcome. Ole Miss, they're in. I really don't see a debate here. Now, look, I do want to say this prior, because there's going to be Florida State fans that get upset if I say there's no question they have to be in no matter what. I think losing Lane Kiffin and losing the offensive staff, pretty much the entire offensive staff, is more impactful. More impactful to what Ole Miss is going to be than losing Jordan Travis was to Florida State. I really do believe that. I don't think it's going to look all that pretty. When Ole Miss eventually does play in the playoff, I can't say that confidently. So this is all a guess from me, that I think it's not going to look all that great. I think they're going to look a little bit out of sync. I don't think it's going to be perfect. And I think that offense is going to probably not play all that well in their CFP matchup. I can't prove that. If they were playing this weekend in the SEC title, then I think it's way more up in the air. And I think that would be relatively fair for it to be up in the air. I can't say confidently how much of a different team they are. So the CFP committee can't either. I think they have to be in the field. If you want to knock them out of a home playoff game, I guess you could. I don't think you should. I think this team has proved plenty enough to get the shot that they deserve, and then you just let the chips fall where they may. It's a very weird situation. It's obviously not ideal for Ole Miss. I don't think it'll work out all that beautifully for Ole Miss in the CFP, but you can't punish them for something that you're not absolutely certain of, and I think you have to keep them in the field because of that. And finally, the team that is pissing off as many people as they possibly can right this second, Steve Sarkisian, on really an all-time politics run right about now, because no one has done it better than him right now. It's been incredible to watch him go to work about this CFP rankings, and he's got some good arguments. There's no doubt about that. I've said this before. I do not believe Texas should be in. I've watched just about every snap of that football team. I don't think they're a playoff football team. They haven't played that way the vast majority of the year. They have some incredible wins. They also have some games where it's just questionable if that team even deserves to play in the SEC. It was terrible football at times for Texas. There's a few things that I've found about this argument that I found a little bit silly. It's not to say that Texas should be in the field. It's not to make arguments for Texas one way or the other. It's just parts of this argument and parts of every argument around the CFP that I've just found incredibly silly, that have been put on display with this one. The number one thing, can we stop starting CFP debates with losses? It's not to say that they don't matter. It's not to say they shouldn't be talked about. And the Florida loss for Texas absolutely should be talked about. The Georgia 25-point loss has to be a part of this discussion, as does the Ohio State loss early on in the season. Period. End of story. The idea that every discussion that I've seen online talking about the CFP and talking about these bubble teams and who should be in and who should be out always starts with who has the better losses. It is the craziest thing in the world to me that in a world where Texas beats Florida by, let's say, 10, but then loses to Oklahoma is somehow a better resume. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand why a terrible win is way more important than a terrible loss is way more important than a fantastic win. I don't get it. I've never understood it. It's the biggest thing I have a problem with when we talk about the CFP discussions and we get into the bubble and we try to decide which team deserves to be in, which team doesn't. Why are we starting with the losses? Why aren't we starting with the wins? Why aren't we starting with the incredible things the team has done and not only starting with the terrible things teams have done? I don't get it. It's a goofy thing that we do. Again, it doesn't mean that losses shouldn't be involved in the discussion. It's just to say it feels ridiculous when we're talking about Notre Dame against Texas, and the argument for Notre Dame is because they lost to Miami and A&M. Bizarre to me that we are doing that. But at the end of the day, that's just a little side note. That's not necessarily specifically about Texas. That's just an overarching thing on all of that. Number two, they are being punished for losing to Ohio State. We can talk about the Florida loss. That absolutely is punishing them more. There's no doubt about that. They are being punished for losing to Ohio State. To me, there is no question that if they played, let's say, Rice on that first weekend instead of Ohio State, Texas would be slotted right above Oklahoma right now. Some people would argue that it would be the Miami-Notre Dame factor. I think a 17-point neutral site win does way more than a 3-point home win. That's just me. I definitely think, and I also don't think Oklahoma's proved beyond a reasonable doubt that they're infinitely better than Texas right now, the way Notre Dame did, at least for a little bit against Miami. Texas would be in if they played Rice in the first week. That's why Sark is talking about canceling those games, plain and simple. And I don't blame him. I really don't. It's not to say that I want him to cancel those games. It's not to say that I think it's a great idea in some cases to cancel those games. I heard Brooks Austin talking about this and just saying, you're Texas. You should want to play everyone tough. You should want to be the team that teams go through, not the team that shies away from a challenge just to get a better shot at the CFP. And I understand that. I'm fully with you. And I do think that is a real reality here. The other part of that is, as a coach, as a program right now, you're defined by if you get to the college football playoff. You're defined how many national championships you win. If a game against Ohio State is going to be a reason that you're not in the college football playoff, why play the game against Ohio State? Now, I want Texas to play Ohio State next year, play Michigan the year after that, and play Notre Dame the year after that, as they are slated to do. But they are being punished for losing to Ohio State. There's really not an argument against that unless you believe that a 17-point neutral site win over Oklahoma holds the same weight as a 3-point home win Miami over Notre Dame. I don't. So they are being punished for that. There's no argument that they aren't being punished for that. They're being punished more for the Florida loss, more for the Georgia loss, but they are being punished for going on the road and playing a team that has been proven to be far and away the best football team in the entire country. Again, that's not saying Texas should be in. It's just saying that they are being punished for playing Ohio State and losing by 7 points. Plain and simple. Finally, the idea that I've seen pretty much everyone that's making this debate, pretty much everyone that is arguing against Texas, goes back to the same line that I think is the most ridiculous thing when we are talking about college football. They say no team with 3 wins should ever make the college football playoff. That is the single dumbest thing that has ever been said. And I don't mean this to say like every 3-loss team should be in. The only thing that should matter is strength of schedule. If you play a tough schedule, congratulations. You can lose 4 games and absolutely be in. This Texas team should not be in. But applying a very firm rule to a subjective group of people in a subjective sport is uniquely stupid. And it would totally cut out the desire to find the right national champion. Let's say Texas played Ohio State, Indiana, and Texas A&M and lost those 3 games, but won the rest of their games against Georgia and Alabama and LSU and a ton of other big-time teams. You're telling me that team doesn't deserve a chance to compete for a national title? You're telling me that team, because they got a 3 in the loss column, just has no right to be in the CFP? Obviously, this is not that case in this Texas team. But the idea that I've seen way too many people say, no matter what, in any circumstance, a team with 3 losses can't make the CFP, that's ridiculous. There's tons of teams that have 3 losses that could very well make the CFP and very well be deserving of making the CFP moving forward, especially with the SEC moving to 9 games next year. That's something y'all are going to have to get out of your head, because that is going to happen at some point, and it's not going to be a crazy conspiracy. It's not going to be SEC bias. It's going to be the right thing to do. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do here. They don't deserve to be in, does the Texas Longhorns, but it doesn't make any sense to say that under no circumstance should a team that lost 3 games be in if that team plays a remarkably tough schedule comparative to everyone else. That's just a uniquely dumb way to look at it. Overall, for the Texas Longhorns, it's not a playoff team. I'm not going to talk your ear off. I'm not going to try to give you the Steve Sarkisian pitch. It's not a playoff team. They played very poorly in a number of games throughout this season. They do not deserve to be in this CFP. I am not going to get mad at Texas. I am not going to yell at Steve Sarkisian. I'm not going to be up in arms if they cancel that Ohio State game next year and they schedule Purdue, and they schedule someone that's a little bit easier, that's a little bit more of a layup. I don't think they'll do that. I think they're going to keep the games. I want them to keep the games. I think it's plenty beneficial to Texas to keep the games. But the reality of the matter is, if you are laying the line that we just talked about, that 3 losses and you're out, why would I play Ohio State? Why wouldn't I play a team where I could get healthy, continue to develop my football team, and then go into the conference schedule with as many losses to play around with as possible? I wouldn't blame them if they were to cancel these out-of-conference games. I hope they don't. Part of me thinks they shouldn't, but that's more of a mental aspect of this, not necessarily a practical aspect of making the CFP, which is the ultimate goal for every program and every team, and the measuring stick for every team. And as I talked about earlier, Texas will be in if they didn't play Ohio State in week 1. You can disagree with that if you want to. I just firmly don't agree with you. But at the end of the day, more than happy to have some discussions in the comments. Don't necessarily want to, go to bat for Texas in any way in this moment. But I do want to say that Ohio State game is I don't want to say the thing keeping them out. It is affecting them not being in the CFP, and I think without that game, they would be in the CFP. I'll leave it there for the time being. It's not a playoff team. That's about it for the Texas Longhorns. I think that will be proven when the rankings come out tonight. Moving forward to the G5, what's the order of the G5 teams tonight? What's the order as we head into this final weekend? Is JMU above North Texas? Is North Texas above JMU? Are either of them ranked? Or are they trying to keep this a little bit ambiguous where they sit comparative to Duke? I think all three should be ranked. I think Tulane should probably be ranked number one. I think it should be JMU right behind them, and then North Texas right behind JMU. That's the way that I would do it. But at the end of the day, if North Texas and JMU are not ranked tonight, then I think there's an opening for Duke. I think if both of them are ranked, then it's going to be a little bit tougher for Duke to find a way into that CFP. It's not to say it's impossible, but a win over the number 18 team in the country, does that bump you over a team that maybe got a dominating win for JMU or for Tulane or North Texas, got a ranked win on their schedule? We'll see. If one of those teams is ranked, just Tulane, you might have a little bit of an issue. If all three of those teams are ranked and it's JMU above North Texas, does JMU go with a big win? If North Texas also wins, does North Texas jump over them? All of that is on the table and will be debated in that room, but where they're ranked coming up on this weekend is going to be huge. If North Texas is above a JMU, then maybe JMU is fully out of this thing regardless of what happens, unless maybe Duke gets a big-time win. But again, the order of these teams is going to be massive. I think all three will be ranked, but we'll see if all three end up being ranked. And as we're talking about G5 teams, I might as well give my quick take on the G5 spot. It's very simple. I'll be totally honest. Now, I'm a proponent of the G5 playoff because I think it would be incredible to watch. I would really enjoy watching it. I also understand it's a relatively slippery slope. Not a lot of people watch the FCS playoffs. There's a very real world where that happens to the G5 playoff, and I don't want that to happen to these G5 schools. My plain take on whether or not the G5 should be in the CFP. Once they went past 6 to 8 teams, you were going to have every team that could win a title and every team that really genuinely deserved a shot to win a title in there. It was not going to be a question. It wasn't going to be a big deal. Once you went past 6 teams, you had everything that you needed to have. Giving a spot to a team like JMU or a team like Tulane or a team like North Texas doesn't seem like the worst thing in the world to me. I'll be totally honest. I'd love a G5 playoff, but I understand the slippery slope there. I understand the dangers of putting them off and kind of on their own island. They could kind of fall off into sea. There's no doubt about that. That is a very, very dangerous proposition. So I'm good with it. I really don't have a massive problem, plainly because all the teams that we're arguing over in the bubble, the vast majority of them don't have a chance to win the national title and don't deserve a shot to go for it. So once you went past 6 to 8 teams, I think we're all good. I think one of those spots going to a G5 team is by far not even in the top 10 of the problems with the CFP right now. So I don't really have an issue with it. I don't. I know a lot of people do, and I wouldn't hate to see a G5 playoff break off from this thing and make this thing a little bit more interesting. But again, I don't think you're going to get them to agree to that, and I really don't think it's a massive deal to watch JMU get beat by 30, especially because I watched Tennessee get beat by 30 last season. Finally, my view on the CFP heading into this weekend, heading into the rankings that are coming out here pretty soon. To me, it's over, and I know that sounds really lame going into conference championship week. To me, it's about seeding in the ACC versus Group of 5 drama. That's about it for this weekend. There are 8 teams that I would argue are in, plain and simple, firmly in this field. Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, and Oregon. I think those teams are firmly in. Some people are debating Oklahoma recently. I tend to believe they're pretty firmly in. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're debating them right now in that room. I think they're in. I don't think there's much of a question there. I think the win over Alabama does plenty for them to be in the field. I guess we'll see if that changes, but I think those 8 teams are pretty firmly in this field, no problem. 2 teams have to be in, additionally to those 8 teams. The Group of 5 representative or representatives, depending on what happens in the ACC championship, or the ACC champ if it's Virginia, if it's Duke, maybe if it's Duke. So that's the question there. Do we have 2 Group of 5 teams? Do we have 1 Group of 5 and 1 ACC champ? Who is that ACC champ is the only question there, but 2 teams need to make it in from that grouping. Then there's 2 spots, and there are 6 teams here, 6 teams that are in debate for those spots, if you will. Bama, BYU, Notre Dame, Miami, Vanderbilt, and Texas. It's Bama and BYU. Period. End of story. I really don't have much of a problem saying that. Now, if they lose by 35, if they lose by 40, if they look ridiculous, if a big-time injury happens, there's obviously caveats to this. If there's big-time changes on Saturday, then yes, my take on this could change, and I'll let you know that on Monday. I promise you that, and I will wear that. But at the end of the day, if these teams compete the way that I expect them to, if Alabama loses by 3 to Georgia, if BYU loses by 11 to Texas Tech, but plays a better game than they did last time, they're in. They're teams that have earned the right to play for power conference championships, and if we're going to sit there and say, nah, you're just not quite good enough, you might as well do away with them. And I think we're going to do that at some point anyway when we expand this thing inevitably again, and I have a whole rant about that when the season's over. Just wanted to worry about the football at this very moment. But at the end of the day, to me, it's Bama and BYU. I think these teams have earned the right to be in the CFP, to earn the right to compete for a national title. I think an 11-1 BYU team not being in the field already is a little ridiculous, and especially if they're playing for a conference championship and have only lost to one team that we're going to deem a top 4 team in the country. I think they should be in. Now, I do think there's a debate there. I get the debate. I've talked about it before. You have to decide, is there an 11-point difference between the number 4 and the number 10 or 11 team in the country? I get that. I totally understand that. But at the end of the day, this is a team that has battled so many different things throughout this year, lost their quarterback about a month before the season, had to start a true freshman, and they found a way to get to 11-1 into Arlington. They should be in. I really don't have a debate for that, unless Texas Tech just blows the doors off them and absolutely tears them apart, and that's about it. I think they're in good shape. I think they should be in, and I think Bama should be in almost regardless. If they get rolled, then maybe we're having a conversation. But as of right now, I don't expect that to happen. I think BYU, I think Bama should be in. I think Notre Dame should be out. I think Miami should be out. I think Notre Dame, their best argument is 2 losses that they took early in the season. That's crazy to me. Miami, you had the world at your feet, and you lost as double-digit favorites in back-to-back games to SMU and Louisville. I'm not going to sit here and try to get you in the playoff. I just really am not. So I think it's Bama and BYU. I really think there is no question to me. I respect Notre Dame, respect Miami. They've done incredible things this year. I think it's Bama and BYU. I don't think there's any question about that. Obviously, there's caveats to that, and we can talk about that on Monday. But as of right this second, it's Bama and BYU as long as they play competitive matchups on Saturday. Now that I've said what I think, or what I want to happen, or what I would do, that's not what I think is going to happen. I want that to happen badly. That's exactly what I would do if I was in the shoes of the committee. I don't think that's going to happen. I think BYU, if they lose by 10-plus points, I think BYU is going to get left out in favor of Notre Dame. I think Bama, if they lose by 10-plus or something, I think they could get left out. I think there's a path for Miami and Notre Dame to get in. Frankly, I think it's probably one pair or the other pair, if I'm being totally honest, because I don't think you can put Notre Dame in without putting Miami in. So I don't know what you do. If BYU and Bama win, that'd make this a whole lot easier. It would definitely just lock up all those 12 positions. If they lose, I still think those teams deserve to be in. I don't think Notre Dame or Miami deserve to be in. It's just one of those things. I go back and forth on this quite a bit. I have throughout this season. People will be mad. I don't think all that's going to happen. All the things that I want to happen, all the things that I just talked about with Bama and BYU, I think it's going to end up being Bama and Notre Dame. I think Bama's going to lose or win that game. I think they will be in. I think BYU is going to narrowly lose their game. I think they'll be out for Notre Dame, and you'll let the anger flow. I think Miami will have a very good gripe to be angry. I think BYU will have a great gripe. I think they're going to do the wrong thing, is essentially the long and short of that. I don't think they're going to make the right decision at the end of this thing. If it was me, it'd be very likely that I'd pick BYU and Bama, barring some crazy change on Saturday, and that could happen. So we'll see what happens in that one. That's my overall take on the CFP as we head into this final weekend. I think it's pretty much over. I think we're just playing for seeding. I don't think the committee sees it that way, and that's rather unfortunate. But at the end of the day, Thank you so much for tuning in to this edition, or just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment, means the absolute world to me. We got a big week. We got another show coming up tomorrow. We got to do a couple of wrap-ups things. We got to do some best bets. We got to talk about the CFP rankings coming out in a couple of hours. We got to get into a number of things before we get out here for the weekend, because going to Washington, D.C. this weekend, we'll be out for the entire weekend. We'll be back on Monday. Promise you that, to break down everything. But wanted to make sure I got everything out of the way. We got all of our picks for the upcoming weekend out of the way. We got some big-time CFP takes out of the way. But at the end of the day, we'll be back tomorrow to talk about the CFP rankings, to draw some conclusions about who's still on the bubble, who's officially off the bubble, all of that good stuff. We'll talk about it all, do some best bets, and all of that stuff tomorrow, so definitely be on the lookout for that. But thank you so much for tuning into this edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment, means the world to me, helps me out a ton. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.